So today we're going to go through a full comprehensive guide of how to train your arms and why we select certain exercises for our arms. And so in order to do this, we have to understand a little bit about the structure, okay? I'm not going to go too in depth. I'm just going to go through the basics. So if you want to skip past this part because you're not really interested, you just want to see the exercises, go for it. But let's first discuss the biceps. So the biceps is it crosses two joints. So it's going to cross the elbow joint and it's going to cross the shoulder joint, okay? So in order to stretch our bicep, we have to not only extend at the elbow, but we also have to extend at the shoulder as well. So that, in this position here, is fully stretching my bicep. And then in terms of the bicep as well, is the bicep actually not only extends at the elbow, but it also works to supinate the hand. So my palms are now facing up, and this means that the bicep is going to be a lot more stretched compared to when my hand is pronated and facing away from me, okay? So what that also leads into is when we consider most of our training in terms of like pulling movements, so let's say bent over row, pull-ups, whatever it may be, we don't tend to be in a supinated position. We tend to be more pronated or maybe more neutral. And so what this means is that our biceps are actually a little less active compared to these two muscles, which are the brachialis and the brachioradialis. Now, these two muscles actually are working a lot whenever you're doing your pulling movements, unless you're using straps, then maybe they're not working as hard, but they still definitely are impacted. And therefore, when I think about training arms, my main priority is to focus on the bicep rather than these two muscles in here, because these muscles are going to be working in a lot of my other exercises more compared to my biceps. That's not to say the biceps aren't working in those exercises. They definitely are, but it's not as impacted compared to when we do a supinated position. So for example, a supinated exercise could be a chin-up where my palms are facing me and I'm coming up onto the bar like that. And that is where we're going to be working our bicep a lot more as well. So when I consider arm training, is maybe I'm just trying to focus on this muscle here, but that's not to say that training these muscles aren't as important, and it's up to you. Maybe your forearms look pretty big and so you're not really worried about that. You just want to grow the biceps, or maybe it's the other way around and you want to work on those as well. But I'll go through some exercises for all of those. So now let us discuss the triceps. So clue in the name, triceps, three muscles. You've got the long head, short head, and medial head of the tricep. Now, the triceps are a little different to the biceps because there's only actually one of these muscles that crosses both joints, crosses the elbow and the shoulder joint, and that is the long head. The other two heads don't actually cross it. So in order to fully stretch the other two heads, all we have to do is flex at the elbow. Okay, so this is elbow flexion, and now when I straighten those two heads, this is where the two heads are fully lengthened, sorry. But in order to stretch the long head, very similar to the biceps, is not only do I have to flex at the elbow, I also have to flex at the shoulder as well. So I'd come into a position like this where my elbows flex and my shoulders flex so that my long head is now fully stretched as well. So that's just a basic little anatomy lesson around the arms. There are obviously more muscles around the arms, but those tend to be the key muscles that we really want to focus on working to make your arms look as big as possible. So now we're going to go through a few dumbbell exercises that you can do to target all of those muscles, okay? We're going to go through some dumbbell exercises, we're going to go through some cable exercises, and I'm going to throw in some easy bar exercises as well that you can do depending on what you have available. Because you may not always have dumbbells available, you probably would, but you may not have a cable machine available. I personally love training on the cable machine compared to dumbbells, but I'll go into why that is later. So firstly, let's discuss the biceps with these dumbbell exercises. So let's assume that you don't have the bench. If you do have a bench, I'm going to show you some variations of these exercises that I would rather you do using the bench. But let's start as if I don't have the bench, all I have is dumbbells and I have to do it standing. So if I want to work my biceps, okay, from a standing position, it's going to be very hard to enter that, to enter both elbow extension and shoulder extension when we're standing because we can't really lean back. So this is the best I can do. So I would say when you're standing, don't worry about that too much, okay? Yes, it's probably better if we can extend at the shoulder, but the amount of impact that has is not as significant as you might think. So simply enough, all I want you to think about doing is keeping your elbow as still as possible. My palms are facing up to the ceiling, okay, so they're supinated. And then when I curl up, I'm gonna think about getting my pinky to try and touch the outside of my shoulder. So it will look something like this for the biceps. So again, trying to keep my elbow still. I can come up with a bit of force, but I need to control it down. With all of these exercises, I don't mind you coming up with speed, but I want you to control it down, okay? So this is your simple bicep curl. Now, if you do actually want to work some of those forearm muscles, we can do pretty much the same exercise, but now we're just gonna change the rotation of our hands. So now we're gonna have our palms facing in towards our body, and now this is gonna be a hammer curl, but same thing, everything else is the same. It's now I'm thinking about driving up, but instead now, I'm thinking about trying to get my thumb to touch my shoulder. Again, keeping the elbow stuck in position, thumb to shoulder, controlling down. Again, coming up with speed, controlling back down. You can come up with speed as long as your technique doesn't get affected, okay? So those two exercises are probably the best way to train your biceps and your forearm muscles, your brachialis and your brachioradialis, as simply as possible, okay? If you don't have access to a bench, those are your two best exercises. Now, in terms of a tricep exercise, there's pretty much only one that I would go for with a standing version of a tricep exercise. And the reason is because this allows us to get into both elbow flexion and shoulder flexion. So bringing the dumbbell above the head, what I've done is so the way I get into position is I kind of create like a little triangle, and then the triangle faces the ceiling, and then the dumbbell sits into that. So the triangle is facing the ceiling, sits into there. Then we're gonna come above our head. And from here same thing, trying to keep the elbow still, same sort of exercise. And we're coming down, driving up. So now we have that elbow flexion and that shoulder flexion. And so all three muscles of the tricep should be working pretty damn effectively, okay? So those are the exercises I would do if I could only do a standing version with these dumbbells. But now let's change it so that I'm gonna assume you all have access to a bench. So let's show you some bench versions of these exercises, which I find are superior. Okay, so the reason why I find the bench is superior is because when I see people doing bicep curls, they always have a tendency when they start to curl to lean back and try and give some momentum to drive that weight up. So what the bench does is it kind of takes that momentum out of the equation because my back is firmly planted against the seat. And so the exercises are actually the same from here. So when I'm in this position, for the biceps is I'm curling the pinky out towards the shoulder and then controlling back down, okay? So that's the same, and then it's the exact same for the hammer curl. Again, leaning back against the bench, keeping the elbow still, coming up, controlling down, okay? But let's get a little bit more advanced. So, like I said, to stretch the biceps, we actually have to not only extend at the elbow, we have to extend at the shoulder. The way we can do this with the bench is like so. Is you bring the bench lower and lower and lower, and just bear in mind that the lower you go, the harder this is gonna be. But if you notice now, when I get into position and I'm led against the back of the bench, now my arms are kind of behind my body. And so I have I have my elbow extension and I have my shoulder extension. And so then I'm curling up from here, exact same cues is curling that pinky out towards the shoulder, but now it's gonna be significantly harder because that bicep muscle is fully stretched. Okay, so that's a way to make that a little bit more advanced. You don't necessarily have to do this with your hammer curls because the hammer curls, this isn't adding an extra stretch because those forearm muscles don't actually cross the shoulder joints, so you don't necessarily need to do that with the hammer curls. But for the bicep curls, I'd 100% recommend that. The other thing you can do with bicep curls, so like I say, stretching at the shoulder as well as the elbow is important and can be beneficial, but that's not to say that you should only ever do that. So I have a great exercise here. So this is called a preacher curl. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to tuck my armpit into the bench and I'm gonna have my elbow firmly planted against the bench as well. So what this is gonna do now is gonna mean my elbow physically can't move. Okay, my elbow is stuck in position. And so from here, the same cues, I'm curling up and then controlling down, curling up, controlling down. So the cues are the exact same. You can change the height of the bench. You can come a little higher if you want to, just whatever is comfy for you. But again, the exercise is the exact same. It's just now my elbow is the thing that can't move. The only downside is maybe I'm not stretching at the shoulder as well. So is that gonna be less effective? Maybe ever so slightly, but this exercise is also super good at training your biceps, okay? Like these small little tips that I have do make a bit of a difference, but if you prefer an exercise, that is not to say that you should only do the exercise that you don't like just because someone told you that it's, it's optimal, okay? Yes, it is great. It's a great way to like fully stretch the bicep, but if you don't like it, you're probably not gonna work as hard. So don't worry too much about, picking and choosing the perfect exercise. Find an exercise that you love, that you can perform well, and progressively overload in time, okay? So this is how we can do this with our bench. And then in terms of triceps, so there's not a lot we can change in terms of triceps with the dumbbells for this exercise, but we can go into a skull crusher. So it's the same process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my arms fully stacked above my shoulders. From there, I'm going to lean them back so I'm almost fighting gravity. My elbows are locked in place and I'm dropping the dumbbells down towards my ears and then driving them back into that same position that I started from, okay? I don't want you to think about driving like forwards. I actually want you to think about driving the weights almost back or directly up, okay? And again, thinking about keeping the elbows as still as possible, okay? So those are some exercises that you can do with the dumbbells that also involve the bench. Okay, so now we're gonna go through some exercises that you can do on the cable machines, which again, in my opinion, I prefer doing exercise on the cable machines. The tension just tends to be more constant throughout the entire range of motion, but if you prefer to use dumbbells, use dumbbells. Well, I'm gonna show you the variations that you can do now on the machine. So step one, is you can do an easy bar curl. So from this position here, again, what I would suggest is standing with pretty much all of these exercises when we're using one pulley, is standing as close to the machine as possible, because as I come further and further away, it now means that I am struggling to drive that bar up. I'm actually coming in more of a diagonal motion. So I would rather come closer to the machine and then drive straight up, curling from there, okay? But the cues are the same. I'm thinking about curling my pinkies towards my shoulders and driving up and keeping the elbows still. So that's one for the biceps. Now let's do the opposite. Let's do the triceps. Same thing with this bar. You can also use a rope for this. I'm not gonna bother showing you. The process is the exact same. It's just you're using a rope. But this is an overhead tricep extension. So getting into position can be quite funky sometimes, but this is my all-time favorite tricep exercise. So from here is I'm letting the bar come down, okay? Keeping my elbows still, all right? And not letting my shoulders like drop, okay? My elbows, when they're in place, my shoulders and everything, they're staying still, and then I'm driving and extending at the elbows, controlling down, okay? Driving, extending, controlling down. This is one of my go-tos for tricep training. But another version of this you can do is actually a push-down version. Now the reason I prefer doing the other version, the overhead tricep extension, is because, like I say, we enter that shoulder flexion as well. Whereas with this, we can't really enter the shoulder flexion, but again, not to say it's not a good exercise. So standing close to the machine and then little squat and keeping my elbows as still as possible, driving straight down, okay? Driving straight down, controlling it up, okay? So that's your 2 tricep exercises you can kind of do with this. With the bicep curl as well, and with the tricep exercise, is if you think you have one side that is a lot more dominant than the other, you might want to try and address that over time. So trying to make these single arm can be a useful tool. So I'll only show you for one of the exercises because, again, the process will be the exact same for any other exercise. But if I want to do a single arm tricep exercise, because, and I'll always start with my weaker side, which for me is my left side, is I'll do the exact same process, but now I'm obviously just doing it with one arm, okay? And then whatever my weaker side gets, I'm gonna do the same on my stronger side. Then eventually, hopefully the weaker side isn't the weaker side, it's actually the same, okay? And you can do the same thing with the single handle doing the bicep curl, all right? All right, so now let's go into one of my favorite bicep exercises. So you're gonna have if you have a cable machine where you can have both of them going at the same time, then you can do this. If you don't, then you might just have to stick to the original one. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a step forwards. And again, the process is very much similar to all the other exercises that we've done, where we're keeping our elbows still, but now I'm entering that shoulder, that elbow and that shoulder extension, and then I'm curling in from here and keeping the elbow still, okay? So curling in, elbow still, and this is probably my favorite exercise. I have one more that I might prefer sometimes, but the next one means that I can't really enter that elbow extension as well. Okay, so that's one of my top tier favorite bicep exercises. So now let me give you my final bicep exercise that I love doing if I'm not really worrying about that shoulder extension. And this is that preacher curl that I showed you with the dumbbell, but now we're doing it with the cable machine. So the process is the exact same. I'm coming in, sinking my armpit into the bench, elbow firmly pressed against the bench, and then from here, I'm curling up and controlling down. And again, thinking about that pinky going towards the outside of my shoulder, coming up with power, controlling down with control. So there you go. There's a full rundown of all of my favorite and probably some of the best bicep and tricep exercises out there. Just remember that when it comes to programming, if you really, really care about your arms getting bigger, one of the keys is volume. So making sure that you increase the amount of sets or the amount of reps that you're doing, as long as you are getting close to failure, okay? We're not just going through the motions, resting, 20 seconds in between each set. Try and rest a long time. The process is the exact same as training any other muscle, is if we can rest a long time, create more mechanical tension in every single set, then we're gonna see our arms grow and grow and grow. And you can experiment with going lower in reps as well, similar to strength training where you go as low as 5 reps. I often recommend, however, because it's very easy for other muscles to take over on some of these exercises, going up to maybe like 10 to 15 reps, something like that. But again, as long as you are close to failure. All right, so when you try this at home, let me know how you get on. But good luck when you try this out there.